If you don't know me, which I think everybody in this room knows me, I'm Sarah Zimmermann, and I teach kindergarten here at Saint Constantine School.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Cogburn, and I teach pre-kindergarten here at Saint Constantine School.
And we are just going to kind of walk you through how we do early childhood at our school. We're the only two people who do it, so we're in the thick of it all the time. And so we just kind of wanted to give you an idea of how our days sort of run and the overarching goals that we have for our students and how those connect between pre-K and kindergarten. I know we have a lot of parents here who have children in kindergarten and some who are in pre-K, so we'll see how those all fit together. Did you want to start first?
Sure.
Okay.
So before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly we do, we're going to give you a picture of kind of why we do what we do in kindergarten and pre-K. So one of our overarching main goals for pre-K and K is to help develop habits in children. So these include classroom habits, like the habit of how to get in line properly, how to sit in your chair properly, how to sit on a rug, how to listen, how to raise your hand. But then along with that, it goes with habits of virtue. So we're not just here to make children obedient, follow everything we say, but we want them to be thoughtful and engaging people who think about what it means to be good and then act on it. So a lot of what we do is giving them language for how to do that. So things like, here's how we say excuse me, may I pass? Can I play with that? And along with those habits of using proper speech also comes the habits of diligence, so starting a task and finishing it even when it's hard. And with that then comes the virtue of courage. Sometimes it's hard to face up to things, so you have to have the courage to go forward and do it. So at the end of the day, the work completed might not be the neatest, might not be the prettiest, but if they're growing as a person, that's what we care about, because the foundation they lay now is what's going to give them the ability to succeed later, especially in our upper school classes where they are very responsible for getting their own work done. And they're not going to have a teacher going, did you turn that in yet? So in pre-K, what this looks like is it's a lot of giving them the language for what they're doing. It's also a lot of giving them sort of new words for virtues. A lot of them, are still learning all kinds of words, like words for their emotions, words for virtue. And it's also a lot about modeling it. So one of the things that they know is that anytime I'm in my classroom, if I break a rule, they're allowed to call me out on it, which they take great joy in. My most often infraction is that I forget to take my shoes off when I come inside, and they very much enjoy it. But the reason that we do that is because it's important that they know that the rules are for everybody and that you enforce rules on yourself. They're not just arbitrary things that grown-ups came up with and said, hey, you have to do this. Instead, it's we are collectively engaging in following these rules to become who we want to be. Because we already are images of God, and now it's time to live up to that.
Yeah, and you're a speaker. This is not my forte. But piggybacking off of that, in kindergarten, we move a little bit toward a more structured environment that will take those opportunities for growing in virtue and growing in kind of beginnings of obedience, right, to a different level, I guess. So I rely a lot on creating a very structured environment where the boundaries create opportunities for conversation about virtue and about their growth as a person. So that might look like, we have a rule about if somebody's playing with something, they can't obviously go and take that thing, but also if they ask that person, can I use this, and that person says no, then they have to move on, right? And that is a source of trouble. They sometimes are like, no, I really want that thing. And so that becomes a conversation about, well, we don't always have to things belong to people, and so we don't always have to share those things. And it's just a conversation about kind of our interpersonal relationship and how that kind of plays out in those ways. It also looks like the way I do classroom management. So I can't remember if y'all are doing a gym jar as well, but you have the gold coin jar. Yes, and I have the gym jar, and that's a concrete way for them to track, okay, am I doing things that are helpful and kind and that build virtue, although they don't think about it that way, right? Like they think, oh, I'm doing good things that make my teacher happy, which is great, like that's good. And I hope they go home and do those things for their parents as well. But filling up that jar over the course of the week gives them a very concrete picture of here we are as a class working together to do these things. And it holds them accountable to each other as well. Because we're a community, we're all growing together, so they have to be able to work together in that way, so it doesn't all come down onto one child to do that. And different a little bit from pre-K, where you have, it's still structured, but it's different structure to the day because there's a lot more play involved. We still play a lot in kindergarten, but your day is more like a different ratio of structured to unstructured play. So it's more of a preparation than for first grade where they're ready to just, sit and do work at specific times of the day, obviously still in play, but it's a kind of transition period.
I guess one more thing about play is in pre-K, we spend our play in longer blocks, and we do our, I guess you'd say academic parts in longer blocks too. And that's because one of the things that both Sarah and I have found is children actually need more time than you think they do to really get into a subject. So doing you could do we do 10 minutes of an activity and then switch. But that actually turns out to be too much. Instead, what you need is to have long periods of time, but within that have the ability for children to choose when they want to switch stations or when they want to switch to use a different sense. Because it turns out they're not, when they get distracted, it's not because they're not interested in the subject, it's because, oh, I've been using touch a lot because I was playing with the sand in science. And all of a sudden, I need to hear something. So I'm going to go over and ask the teacher to read me a book about sand. And so that kind of switch allows them to stay engaged with the subject for a very, very long time, but still think about it in different ways.
Yeah, and that definitely plays into, we'll get into talking about how we teach math and how we teach reading and writing, which are the bulk of our day, and that very much goes into that in terms of the child is the focus of the classroom, as they should be. The teacher does set the boundaries and the rules, but we are child-focused and we're child-paced. So each child, because we're such small classes with a really, really nice teacher-to-student ratio, then we can offer individualized instruction to each child, and that plays out really well when they have choices within the classroom. So we'll go more into that when we talk about math and reading and writing instruction. Do you want me to start with that? Sure. Or, okay, yeah, so I'll do that.
But I do want to.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Okay, so this is what I actually like talking about. Philosophy is good, but guys, this is what it's all about. This is the bulk of what we do. So spell, write, and read is our phonics curriculum, and cursive first is our cursive instruction for penmanship. And it is the bulk of what we do. Hands down in kindergarten, we do math. Of course we do math, and we spend a large bulk of time on math. But we need, since the overarching goal of the school is to create students who speak well and write well, this is the pivotal kind of thing that we're about. So it looks different, obviously. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we implement that in pre-K and kindergarten, and Elizabeth, you can jump in if I'm butchering, exactly what you guys do. But in terms of penmanship, so we're talking about teaching cursive, right? But we're not just talking about the mechanics of writing letters. We're talking about creating something beautiful, right? Their handwriting should be something beautiful by the time they get, up into high school. Now, is it something beautiful when they're in kindergarten? It's something, but I don't know. I have seen some really beautiful handwriting, but in pre-K, they're less focused on the actual mechanics of it and more on the pre-writing skills. So they're working on number writing is actually a pre-writing skill in a lot of ways. It's teaching them direction. It's teaching them how to, kind of spatial awareness type things on the page, what their hand is doing in space, all of that kind of stuff. And working on shapes. One of the big things with penmanship is forward movement. So we want them to know that we read and we write from left to right? So they should be able to have a sense of direction in their movement, whether it's scribbling or drawing or whatever. They should have that sense of movement in the right direction. They do work on some cursive letters, of course. You always have kids who are like light years ahead and they're ready to go before the rest of the class might be. So that ties in also with the phonics instruction as well and tends to happen more toward the second semester. Penmanship in kindergarten looks more like we're building a foundation. So they've got pre-writing skills at that point. They've been working on fine motor stuff, lots of Play-Doh, lots of things to build little muscles in their hands and all of that. And now we're actually like targeting those specific skills. So we sit down in small groups and I teach 3 letters per day, and we do, same pre-K actually, I'll do different sensory activities for teaching those different strokes and things like that. So it's very verbal, like oral, they have to listen, and then physical because they're writing. So they're hearing me give them verbal cues for writing, and then they are following those verbal cues hopefully correctly. We had our first week this week with cursive, and it was an adventure for sure. I found out who knows direction and who does not. So it's okay though. Like some of them were discouraged, and I was like, how many times in your life do you think you're going to do a new thing? And they were like, I don't know. They can barely think past tomorrow. They can't think of when they're 25. I was like, you'll do a lot of new things in your life that you're not going to be good at it the first time every single time, right? So don't hurt yourself. Go ahead.
In pre-K, we don't actually write until the very end of the year. Right. Instead, we use our fingers and we have like large laminated cursive letters and we trace them or we put Play-Doh over them or yarn. And that's just because usually at a pre-K age, writing with a pencil or a crayon or anything is very, very hard. So what we want them to get in pre-K is a sense of the form of the letter. So that when they get to Sarah and she says, do this, they're like, I recognize that, I know what it is. And then she's able to give them the mechanics to finish out the job.
Right. Because the goal of penmanship across the grades, starting in kindergarten really, but in beginnings and pre-K, would be making the correct strokes in the correct order, in the correct direction. So whether your handwriting is, absolutely atrocious or it's really, really beautiful, if the correct strokes in the correct order, the correct direction are happening, okay, like we can tweak those other little things, and also going into that in kindergarten, we're building a foundation for like good writing habits, like physically sitting down and writing kind of habits, like the way they sit, the way their feet are, the way their paper is positioned, just bodily awareness, that's really the bulk of a lot of early childhood. Where's my body in space? What are my body parts doing? How are my body parts affecting other people? Which you wouldn't think would be important for penmanship instruction, but amazingly it is, especially when they're sitting in a little circle and they've got all their desks close together and somebody's falling out of their chair and, smacking the person next to them all the way down. And they're like, okay, this is not conducive for writing, right? Like, we have to work on this awareness of, oh, I have to sit in my chair to do this. They're not totally always ready for that at that age. That might come more in first grade, but it's something we emphasize and work with. And I mean, in pre-K, yeah, you're doing that all the time. You're picking them up off the floor because they're falling over all the time out of their chairs. In terms of reading skills, so pre-K is working obviously on more pre-reading things. We're not really a school that pushes toward fluent reading in pre-K. I mean, sure, maybe we have children who are really awesome at that, and that's great. And there's a place for that, and we will encourage that child and read with them and do all the things that you need to do to support that. But for the most part, we're looking at reading is going to start in, end of kindergarten into first grade. It's going to be a long-term skill they're building over time, just like the penmanship. I mean, that's something they do up through, forever. Like, that's just something you work on your whole life, right?
Which is why we use phonics, because that takes longer to teach initially, but the payoff is so much more, because now you're not reliant on sight words to say, did I see this word already? Instead, you can figure out exactly what it says. So in pre-K, we're learning the sounds of the phonograms, and blending them together is really hard, and that's why it's going to take them all the way through kindergarten first to really grasp that skill. But once they have it, they're now equipped so that when they're handed college level texts in high school, they're able to say, I might not know that word, but I can figure it out.
Right. I think we're told a lot of times, and you hear this in other school settings, that English is illogical, we don't understand how it works, there's so many exceptions. Okay, I can tell you there are no exceptions, very few. Even the word, my kids last year were the word you, Y-O-U, that ends with a U. You can't end an English word with I, U, V, or J. And I was like, let's look that up. So, comes from Old English, right? It used to have a W at the end, so it's fine. We just stole it and it changed a little bit over time, right? We didn't steal it, it was just changed, right? Although we have stolen a lot of words and we talked a lot about that too. But they care about that. Even in kindergarten, they're asking me questions about where are these words coming from and how does this work? And that's the kind of thought process that we want to encourage as they're moving into harder spelling lists and writing papers and beginning to read more difficult texts. That way they have the skills to interpret those things for themselves, right? And that also looks like, you're screwing up a little bit, but okay, good. I was just going to talk about teaching the building blocks. But I've been already talking about that a little bit already, right? Why do we teach phonics? Because we need to start at the base level, right? We're breaking words up into the sounds and starting there to give a foundation for a place to build. Same with cursive. That's a different kind of building block, right? We've moved over time to teaching mostly print with, the advent of print. It became more popular to do that. But we're finding that with cursive, because of that forward direction and forward movement, it keeps kids from doing things like flipping, their D's and B's, and keeps the flow of handwriting in the correct direction, and keeps spacing well. They're more spatially aware because they have to be to write cursive, so it just looks nicer, right? But it also helps with learning disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, things like that. Because you don't have the problem with flipping letters and those tendencies that come with that, then it becomes easier to read your own handwriting, which is really the bulk of the curriculum. They begin by reading their own spelling lists, and those are the first words they read in class. And then from there, we move on to texts that have those spelling words in them, so then they're looking at print. So it's not like they're never going to be exposed to print. They're always exposed to print. Which is one of the other big things I would say between pre-K and kindergarten we're always doing. They do a lot of, do you want to talk about print awareness kind of stuff that y'all do?
Yeah, we have a time called book time, which the kids love. It's where it's about 5 minutes and they're allowed to pick any book off the bookshelf and pretend to read it. They're allowed to read it to me. They're allowed to make up whatever story they want with the pictures, and I will laugh at all the jokes. And they just really love it. And what it does is it teaches them, books are for you. And also, this is how we turn the pages. And later in the year, they start to follow with their finger like me. And then this is also when I learn all the weird like tics I have during reading time. Because they'll be like, and then the crocodile went, and then they'll close the book, snap! So yeah, so we're focusing on both print awareness and also a love of reading. Hopefully, by the end of pre-K and K, they love books even if they're not fully confident in reading them.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even especially at the end of kindergarten, even if they're not reading fluently, we want them to love books. So, like we read a huge amount. We read at least an hour total out of the whole day. Like we're talking, what we're in school for 6 hours. I don't know, it's blurred. 6 hours, and we read for an hour out of that. So, I mean, that's just as much time as. Like kinder goes outside half an hour in the morning, in the afternoon, and actually if they stay late, even longer than that. So we're reading just as much as side time. Both equally important tasks, definitely. Anything else you want to add on that? Oh, that was this. Just some like kind of facts I want to throw out there, I guess, about how we teach or how we our spelled right reading cursive first instruction. We both spend about an hour and a half on that instruction per day. And so the benefit of having a homeroom teacher that we spend all their time with is we don't have to just spend an hour and 15 minutes on something. There's no transition time we have to deal with. It's a full hour and a half.
And
yes.
Especially in pre-K, that hour and a half, they all think it's playtime. They'll be like, oh, we're making letters out of Play-Doh. So it's not like an hour and a half of like them sitting and like learning and sort of the way you are right now.
Yeah.
That would not be appropriate to their development.
Right. We do a lot of all of our activities for that are centers based. So I have 9 centers in my room, and that's where that choice comes in that we were talking about earlier. That kids have it's child focused. The child has a choice of what they're doing within boundaries. So that's what we're talking about. They have to pick from 3 things instead of going to all 9 things. And some days they might not get to go to all the things, and that's okay. And they always have to come to me, and that's fun too for them sometimes. It depends on what we're doing. But that's where they get that kind of one-on-one instruction as well. And you guys also are implementing centers this year, but it looks very different.
And it's also, we're doing it a lot slower because the first, I would say, month or 2 of pre-K is all about just helping them learn how to live together properly. And it's a lot of, it's hard. If you have siblings, you know what it's like when you have a bunch of like kids and then you have like the teacher person and you're like, what can I get away with? But also, I have a problem, who do I talk to? So the first 2 months is about that, and then now we're starting to get more into the academic side of things.
Yeah, and we launched in right at the beginning pretty much, so we're already into like our second or third week of centers at this point. But those centers become important for developing other skills too. You know, they're doing like targeted instruction, either one-on-one with one of us, but they also have time to explore within the subject as well. So, for example, I have a bookmaking center. So one of our goals for language and writing and all of that is for them to be able to organize their ideas. Now, they're not going to sit down and actually write a story, right? They don't have those skills yet, but they will staple together a tiny little book, and they'll draw a picture, and they'll write in their fake little language, their little made-up thing that they want to, or sometimes, by the end of the year, they'll actually write some letters in it, and they'll have words in it. Another center would be a retelling one. Y'all do sequencing, so they're beginning to think about these, there's certain steps for things, right? These are the things that go in order, and once they're in my class, then we hear stories, and then they can retell them with a friend or by themselves, and there's little props and that kind of thing. So it takes other skills too that are important to language and writing development and all of that, and gives them opportunities to explore within that. And right now, obviously, I'm doing a lot of like walking around and making sure that we're actually using materials the correct way. But overall, like over the course of a year, it's amazing to see their development just within those areas. They'll do a lot when they're given the chance to just explore, which we find across all the subjects and in their play outside.
The more free they are to explore, the more they
within their boundaries.
Yeah, within their boundaries.
We're
you,
big
have
on the boundaries.
you have to prepare the environment so that they can really shine.
That was all I
So I'm going to talk about our math program. So this is our math book. It's through Singapore Math, which is a thing that we use all throughout our lower school. And Singapore Math is really wonderful for a couple of reasons. One is that it follows the development of the child. So this is the pre-K math book. It's very colorful. You have pages where you're not even doing anything with writing. Like here, like you're stacking blocks. And so that goes into, Singapore Math has a really wonderful method of, first you start with a concrete lesson. So there are no math books out because you're actually using objects. So later in the year, we're going to have blocks and we're going to measure each other. And we're going to see how many blocks tall is Mrs. Cogburn, which is always fun. I'm 5 blocks tall, by the way. And then what happens is after they do that concrete activity, they move to what's called the pictorial step. So you have an actual picture of an activity that we did in class. Let me find a good example. So here we sorted toys into toy boxes and cars into the right color of house. And then they have a picture where they do that again. And the reason that you go from a concrete step to a pictorial step is that's actually very complicated because you're going from a 3D object to a 2D object, and that's very hard. And then what we want them to do after that, and we work toward, is going from this 2D pictorial step to like representational symbols of numbers. Like this is the number 1, and it's like 1 block, but it's also 1 Miss Zimmermann and 1 chair, and that's a very big thing to figure out. And once you get that, you are set for a lot of math. You are not set for maybe like imaginary numbers and all that. You're set for a good part of math. And so Singapore Math recognizes this, and so focuses on how to help kids. Now in pre-K, we use our books sometimes, we don't always use them. That's because a lot of, this is, if you read it, kindergarten mathematics, so it requires a lot of writing. And we're not always ready for writing, so sometimes we use stickers that have the numbers on it. Sarah, of course, has her children writing the numbers, or writing whatever they're asked to write.
Yeah, and even we don't do all of the pages in there. Yeah. It can be a lot.
And it also, all of the Singapore math books follow the same cycle. So you start with numbers, you move to shapes, then you move to measurement, and you cycle back. So as they're going through all their years here, they're repeating that same cycle over and over again, but they're spiraling out and expanding their knowledge of it. But that also means that there's something they didn't understand in kindergarten, it's going to get cycled back to them for first grade, but expanded so that they can understand it better. And in addition to Singapore Math, we do individually directed activities. So as soon as you finish your page or whatever you're asked to do, you may go to the math section of the classroom, pick out anything you want, and you can use it in the way that you've been taught. In my class, that's just play with it. But Ms. Zimmermann has some more
Mine is similar, yeah.
specialized
math boxes. Yeah, but that includes things like lacing or beading things, kind of more fine motor skills, also using Unifix cubes for different activities, pattern blocks, that kind of thing. Yeah. So it looks like play still. They get a free choice in that as well. They can just come and pick it whatever they would like and work with it.
And with that kind of goes our goal for them is by the end of the year, we want them to know how to use numbers to apply it to the world. So in pre-K, what that looks like is we want you to be able to count things. We want, if your mom says, can you go get me 3 spoons to set the table? You can go 1, 2, 3. And the secondary goal of that is we want them to begin to know how to use written numbers to do things. So that if you hand them a number and you say, here's a number, can you get me that number of things? They can use it. And it's really fun because they start to use those skills on the playground. I taught pre-K a game called Teacher May I. They're like, teacher, may I take 3 steps? And then they have to use those numbers that they've been learning. Most of them know their numbers when they come in, but it's sort of concreting what they already know.
Yeah, one of the biggest skills with that is that one-to-one, I'm blanking on the wording, but if they're counting a group of objects or they're taking a certain number of steps, each step or each object is one number. That is a really big deal, and even in kindergarten, you still get, I'm counting a group of 5 objects, and I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I've already skipped over, 3 of them, but I keep counting. So that's even between pre-K and kindergarten, that's still a skill that they're working on. It's something that's more solidly understood by the time they get to 1st grade. One-to-one correspondence. Sorry.
I think, and so in terms of like the nitty-gritty of like how much time we spend on math, in my class we spend about 30 minutes of specific instruction, but then what happens is throughout the day we'll, play games or have intentional activities that cultivate that math skills. And a lot of that happens with our outdoor playtime. In pre-K, we spend at least 2 45-minute blocks outside. And that's because that's where they're really going to learn and take ownership of their learning.
We haven't really talked a lot about our outdoor play kind of philosophy, I suppose, but it's very Charlotte Mason-esque. She was very into the children do the bulk of their work at the beginning of the day so that the afternoon is free for play and outdoor exploration. Pre-K does that very well. Kindergarten, I feel like we're stuck in so much in that sometimes we don't always have time to do that as well. I forgot to talk about our vocabulary instruction as well, but you know what? That's just like another thing that we're doing too, and it's all great and it's all wonderful, but it really jam-packs the day. So we go out anytime we have time to go out, pretty much, rain or shine.
I think our final thing that we want to talk about. So we are an Orthodox school here at the Saint Constantine School, and both Sarah and I are involved in what's called Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, and that is the religious education for small children here at Saint Constantine. It is a wonderful program, and one of the special things about it is that it's all individual instruction, and for the most part, it's all just direct words from Scripture. We are not here to get, one of the things they tell you in your training is don't get between the child and what God is saying. You are here to facilitate by bringing whatever skills they need to meet the Scripture, and then you step back. So we found the best way to kind of show what this is not to talk about it, but to actually do what was done for us when we trained, which is to give the presentation. And so we wanted to end by showing you what it's like to be a child and to actually see it in action. And so Ms. Zimmermann has graciously agreed to be a child and to play that role.
I just wanted to say we found that in teaching small children, it is true that you have to become like a child, really, to understand how to teach small children. And going through this training was at least like life-changing for me and for Elizabeth in how we approach teaching young children. And it's kind of permeated into pretty much every aspect of how we teach the children, even though this is only a kind of-ish 2-hour block. On Tuesdays, we're working up to 2 hours.
We made it. We did make it.
We did. We made it this week to 2 hours, and it was amazing, and it was quiet and reverent and beautiful, and man, it was like the best day we've had. It's awesome.
If you have a child who this is their first year, just so you know, they have not had this yet. So if you ask them about it, they'll be like, what?
Yeah.
But they will be getting it in the spring.
Yeah, we have a mixed group this year with like 6 children who were with us last year. Now they're in there's a 3-year cycle through their first level in the atrium, as we call it. And so we've got kids in their 2nd year, and so they've had this presentation and several other ones, of course, and we're presenting those to our new students on the same timeline. So some of them, they see a child working with this word, and they're like, I really want to work with that one. Can you please teach me that one? And we're like, sorry, you have to wait. Like, waiting is hard. Yes, waiting is hard. I think I say that 50 times a day, but I haven't learned it yet, so neither have they.
Elizabeth, would you like me to just sit?